Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Salesforce for Recruiters. I'm your host as always, Brad Owens, and today I wanted to talk about something that used to just absolutely drive me crazy. All of the administrative work of getting forms filled out, of getting this form for this customer and this onboarding thing for this customer. Where did we keep that onboarding document and where did they need to have this and how do we get signature and all of that tracking and all of the form fills. It was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. So the good news about recruiting on Salesforce is you have access to all these different apps that you could use to solve any one of these point problems. And one of the applications out there is called BlockForms. So for today, I've got the co-founder of BlockForms, Benet Heames, to talk to us about BlockForms, about how it integrates into Salesforce, about how it can really start reducing your time to placement. And he walks us even through the app in a demonstration. So I just think you'll get a ton of value out of listening to this, and you should be checking out BlockForms. We'll talk all about how to get in touch with them as we move through the show. So I hope you enjoy it. Here we go. Here's Benet. So Benet, thank you so much for taking time out. Appreciate you coming to talk to the audience about what you've got going on inside of this whole recruiting tech ecosystem. I understand you are the co-founder of BlockForms. So tell us a little bit about you, kind of how you came into this whole space, and then what is BlockForms?
Great, Brad. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and sharing the story with your audience, and hope this makes a big difference for recruiting firms and folks that are using the Asymbl product with Salesforce. I'm Benet. I'm co-founder with BlockForms, and this idea started 5 years ago working in the insurance business, which is where I based most of my career. And I was an insurance broker working with small to mid-sized employers trying to implement multiple insurance products like medical, dental, vision, life insurance. And every single insurance carrier that you're working with has their own set of applications and forms. And if you're a small employer, like a manufacturing company, you don't have the time to fill out 50-page insurance applications. So I would do all of that work myself. And I would realize, man, there's some information that's just so similar across all of these documents. I wish I could just populate them all at the same time. And then another light bulb went off and I was like, man, some of this information I need to get from my client. And some of it I have, but why can't I just have them interact with this all at the same time? So that was the genesis of BlockForms. And what we are is a data collection, data organization, form mapping solution that deals with the original form that needs to be submitted, whether it's an insurance contract or an onboarding document or a government contract. The native nature of that form is what we're protecting and filling out. So there's a lot of other services that are out there that allow you to create a form, allow you to maybe create surveys, collect information, and then you'll spit it out in an Excel file or a PDF. And what we're doing is we're collecting that and inputting it into the native PDF that has to be filled for completion of that service. So that idea 5 years ago, we were able to get into some pre-accelerators. We were able to get some funding. We've been able to have some success in the insurance business, specifically with general agencies that are dealing with hundreds of insurance products, and really simplifying and streamlining their onboarding customer solution.
That's incredible. I love that. That is one of the major pain points that I used to have when I was just recruiting constantly. So let's set the table then. So we've got a recruiting agency. They have tons and tons of admin paperwork right now. They have onboarding paperwork that they need to have individuals fill out. They've got offer documents that either need to be created or filled or whatever it might be. They've got background screening and checks. They've got credential stuff that they need to send out, and it's all repetitive paperwork. How does BlockForms fit into that?
I love that because there's so many parts of this operational problem that we can solve. We can solve it for your recruiter. We can solve it for the placement specialist, and we can solve it for the recruiting firm as a whole and making a competitive advantage in the marketplace when they're trying to source new clients and say that we're easier and faster to work with. And we do that through BlockForms. So let's talk about the candidate onboarding experience, right? So if you're a candidate and you've got, some credentials, you've got some specialist information to unique jobs, how fast can you get placed, right? That's how recruiting firms make money. So we like to look at what we call the speed to job or speed to start. So once that person has been given the green light, how much time is going to pass before they're actually on the clock, on site, and working for that employer. Now, that time is what we want to measure. So in that time, what's your normal process look like? How many forms need to be completed and submitted by that candidate in order for them to walk in that employer's door? So that's where it goes to that. Is it the offer letter? Is it the background? Is it drug policy? Is it safety and safety and security policy that are specific to that employer, not just general forms? And then you got to start looking at specific jobs and functions that might have other forms that are required with it, maybe like a forklift certification or fill in the blank. We found some really interesting case studies with government and with healthcare, where there is such it's almost limitless, the amount of forms that have to be completed by candidates in order to get placed. So if you can have those forms pre-filled right as they're moving that candidate into a placement field, because it's done digitally, then you're really simplifying and streamlining and expediting that speed to job placement.
Got it. So we're taking this speed to job of, hey, we've got this person who's now said, I'm taking this job. How quickly can we get this person placed and actually on their assignment? We're talking about speeding that thing up. Okay. So tell us about the features that then lead to speeding this thing up. What are we actually interacting with? What does the candidate interact with?
Yeah.
I guess
so
what
let's
does it
start with your recruiting firms that are going to be working with an employer. They're going to want to get those employer-specific forms that they're going to need to be completed, right? And maybe that's a normal process that the firm does, and they say, hey, we're going to handle this, and we're going to send this to your clients. And usually they're sending it via PDF and in the mail or in email, of course. But they're going to rely on the candidate to actually fill it out. So we start with getting those specific employer forms, and we get those into the BlockForms system. So we'll have those forms mapped into the specific jobs or folders or roles that are really specific that you're recruiting for. Now that's going to be tied back into Asymbl, which we'll show here in a few minutes when we're going through different stages of the candidate lifecycle, where once you're moving to a stage, it's going to already pre-select some of those forms for you. So once you've gotten those employer-specific forms and we've gotten them into the BlockForms system, it really just comes down to moving the candidate within the Asymbl Salesforce product. So once you've moved into the different stages, those forms are triggered. The candidate is going to receive an email from BlockForms, allowing them to log in, and it's going to ask them to fill out some of the basic questions that have been unified across the employer documents that you're submitting. So they're not typing out their name 15 times. They're not putting in their address 10 different times and signing multiple places. They'll be able to type in their name once. That'll pre-fill the documents. They'll put in their address. They'll put in any other specific information that's relevant for the forms that are being requested for that job, allowing for electronic signature and getting that submitted. So this is a process that can literally be done now in minutes with having both documents filled out by both candidate and the placement specialist at the recruiting firm.
So that sounds like a little bit of a differentiator to me then. You're talking about filling a form with data and also getting that form signed. And You're talking about now this one person who's the candidate in this case, they filled out, we'll just use their address. Like they filled out their address, they filled out their email, they filled out phone number and all that stuff once. And then you're applying that to all of the different forms that they get.
Correct. And as you know, that's probably on every single form that has to be filled out anyway, right? Most of the time it's like, candidate information up top and then a bunch of legal jargon with some checkbox and a signature down at the bottom. Well, now we can fill out everything that's up on the top. They can still sign that checkbox and signature down at the bottom. And we've got that entire suite of forms completed.
So how does that stack up with the other kind of apps that are like this out on the marketplace?
Great question. So what we have found to be our biggest differentiator is that the standard app that you're getting from that employer oftentimes is the required one that has to go back. It has legal language. It is fillable forms in the PDF that are already pre-coded. So take government or healthcare, again, as some leading examples. I would imagine finance is very similar with this too. Very specific, employer-specific contracts that have to be filled out. So you cannot simply create a survey, type in, put in your address, put in your name, and then check these boxes with pre-filled content. It has to actually go back to that original PDF form that has to then be signed by the candidate. So we've seen some other services out there where they can certainly create the form, they can create an electronic signature, but they are not then taking that data and transposing it back onto that native PDF.
Got it. So if we're dealing with some highly regulated industries or
Exactly.
something where, like you keep bringing up the government thing, I know that when you're recruiting for them, they've got very specific processes they have to put people through. And I've
Right.
seen it such that we had to have this filled out by the candidate because we had one single form of e-signature tool. And then it comes back to us and we're like, oh man, now we have to put it into that actual form. So it's creating double
Right.
work.
Well, and then you bring up, these regulated industries, they update their forms like monthly almost, right? It's like this is version SR 131-2 is the form that we're using for February. Make sure that that's the form that's submitted. Well, our system allows very easily and fast to get these forms updated into the library. So you're selecting the right one.
Okay. So tell me about this integration then, because we keep bringing up Salesforce. This is
Sure.
obviously the Salesforce for Recruiters show, and we are bringing up the Asymbl applicant tracking system. So when we talk integration, integration is such a just varied word itself. There's no integration in the way that people define integration.
Right.
So for this scenario, what truly does integration mean, and what are we really talking about?
I love it and appreciate the transparency with integration. So when we built BlockForms for Asymbl, we wanted to be able to have the candidates linked to different stages within the candidate lifecycle. So when you move them to a different stage, it will flow over to BlockForms that these are the forms that need to be specifically filled out by this candidate. And we'll show you that in a second. Once that information is in BlockForms, you could still manually select some other forms if needed, but we've built the system so that you, the employer or the recruiting firm, can really set the rules and the forms based on the stages that are built into Asymbl. So that data will flow over to BlockForms. Once you are in BlockForms, you don't have to log out, log back in. We've built that integration so that just seamlessly flows through. Then you'll be able to send the candidate the form from BlockForms. Candidate completes the signature process. You'll have the completed PDF in BlockForms, at which point you can download that PDF and you would have then the completed form to get back to your client or to upload into a Salesforce document warehouse. So the actual completed product lives in our system, but you are able to download the signed version of that and move that really to wherever you need, because most likely your customer is not logging into your recruiting firm Salesforce. They have no need for that. There's no capability for it. So you're really just sending them the completed PDF once it's been done through the process. Now, the candidate, on the other hand, from the candidate experience, they're only going to see that login for BlockForms, filling out those questions, and then having the signed documents done. So there's not multiple systems for them to log in either.
That's fantastic. I love that. So to those that are listening who are like, yeah, it's the Asymbl ATS. Okay, so inside of Salesforce, you can add on any sort of apps from the App Exchange to kind of create your own environment, much like the iPhone has the iOS App Store. One of those apps on the App Exchange is called the Asymbl, ASYMBL, applicant tracking system. With that, you can have a native applicant tracking system built inside of Salesforce, and you can use any part of Salesforce that you want to, in addition to have an applicant tracking system. One of the big features of that applicant tracking system itself, the Asymbl app, is that you can configure business processes that are unique to you, unique to the jobs, unique to the companies that you're recruiting for. However you want to define this as unique, you can set up a unique process for that. And in just what we're talking about here with BlockForms, you're able to have those forms set ready to go so that in simple drag and drop fashion, if you have a candidate who you're on the phone with and they said, yep, sounds great to me, you drag their name into the offer bucket or the onboarding bucket or whatever it is, all of these things are triggered. We're talking about true business process automation. So, Ben, if you don't mind, if you want to pull up a screen, show us how all this stuff works, that'd be great.
Jump into it. All right, Brad. So here is our Asymbl ATS recruiting homepage. And how we built this is really based on the jobs function. So coming on over to jobs, well, this is, of course, a demo, so it's pretty sparse. I would imagine your firms are going to have a lot more content in here. But we've got job name is the accountant, and the account is the e-commerce hub. So let's go ahead and click into this job. And from here, this is really where the special service is for BlockForms. Now, this is an enabled BlockForms customer, so we've been able to work with this recruiting firm. And you'll see up here are our different stages of the candidate cycle. We've got our long list, short list, interview, offer, onboarding, placement. So we want to take this candidate and we want to move the candidate into the placement phase. So once we do that, that will trigger create the record, and we're going to create a placement. Now, this is already generating a block, is what we call this file within BlockForms. So by clicking this link, it will take us over to BlockForms, and let me share this one now. Now I've seamlessly moved into the BlockForms library for this candidate. These are the folders that we have set up for this demo environment, and I can select any other forms that I need, but ideally we've got the rules based on once you hit placement, all of the forms that are required for placement will be created. In this scenario, we're going to select a few different forms just to show what we can do. So we need to get the I-9, we need to fill out a drug testing policy, and let's go ahead and create that form. So once I have a form that's created, I'm going to come back to my blocks. We will see our active blocks here in just 1 second, and we'll be able to send this block to the candidate. And we'll do that by clicking send form, this icon right here. Now, there's two different parts of these forms. You have client or candidate fields, and you've got the recruiting firm agent fields. So let's say in an example where we have we've got specific information that the recruiting firm is going to need to input into, let's say, an offer letter, maybe like a rate of pay or a manager information. The candidate doesn't know that. We allow now for the recruiting firm to put that into the specific documents that have been created. So when that link gets sent out, the recruiting firm puts in what they're responsible for, the candidate's putting in what they're responsible for, and all of that goes into that electronic signature process for completion. So that's high level how the different workflows build out. Again, we built the rules so that once you have the different stages, you're tying the required forms to those stages. And then once the final is ready to be placed, you can click send form directly from the BlockForms system that you've linked in from Asymbl.
And then the candidate gets that email, they're in, they've got their things they need to fill out, their e-signature, and then
exactly
everything moves on. And just through dragging and dropping. We're not
exactly
talking about adding some crazy, new, complicated process. It's a one-time setup, I'm assuming, and we get this thing set up in the system. Yeah, you're going to have to keep up with the forms, but getting everything set up and configured is a one-time setup.
Correct.
Amazing. And what is it like getting up and engaged with BlockForms?
The first question to think about is really, what does your form universe look like? You know, what would be in your form library? Let's say you're a recruiting firm that's working with 7 major companies in the area, right? What are the specific forms for each one of those companies? That's probably where I would initially think about gathering that information so that you know, okay, we know we've got 20 forms over here, 30 over here. Oh, this company is a mess. They're changing stuff on us all the time. So really gathering those forms, and that's what we need to get into your specific library. We're finding that it's not really that many. That's kind of an extreme example. It could be a maximum of 20 forms that are in your library, to be honest. So once we've established your form library size, then our team is going to configure those forms for you. We'll set up a couple implementation calls, and then we'll build out and get you rolling. And you're right, the ongoing requirement is really making sure that the forms are updated. So as you get updates from your employer client, you're getting that into the BlockForms library as the most up-to-date version for you.
Seems pretty straightforward to me.
We hope so, yeah.
So tell me about what some of your customers have to say about this. What's their experience been?
Yeah, so one of the interesting things that we've learned in the market is that in the recruiting space, or let's just say the general workforce thinks, wow, you know, we don't have enough jobs, right? We're hearing about jobs, and really there are plenty of jobs and there are plenty of candidates. It's getting people connected to the right job at the right time seems to be one of the problems in our current society. So we're seeing that, you know, if you think about how many candidates that you have for one role, how fast can you get the candidates into a qualified stage, into an onboarding stage, and into a place stage? So you're tracking that regularly as a recruiting firm. And so that's really a metric that we've heard a lot resounding, is that we are losing good quality candidates because our onboarding process takes so long. And by the time they get through it, somebody's already taken the job, or another firm was able to get in there faster. So that's why we think this is a great selling tool for recruiting firms to say, we can do this faster, and we'll have your employer specific forms ready to go for any candidates that are qualified, that are going to walk in your door for a job that we're placing.
Speed to hire.
And from the insurance standpoint, just to give you some context, some customers that we've had, and we've dealt with some really complicated forms, like forms that have 700 different data inputs, and really taking a process that they were tracking was on average about 3 weeks to go back and forth between an employer and an insurance broker and getting these contracts filled out correctly, taking it down from 3 weeks down to 2 days. So for them, that was massive. That's a huge relief on a service team. It's a huge relief on a sales team. And then for the insurance carriers on the back end, they're not getting piecemealed forms. They're getting everything completed correctly so that they can then input it into whichever archaic system the insurance carrier is using.
So even though we're talking about use cases that aren't recruiting specific, we're talking about things that are far more complex than what I've seen typical recruiting process need. So you've already proven that you can really handle the volume because of those different kind of areas. So how could folks get started with BlockForms? Where should they go?
Well, so the first place, check out our website, which is blockforms.co, and BlockForms is one word. And I'll give you my email, which is Benet@blockforms.co. I'd be happy to set up a consultation, talk about forms, talk about your current workflows. Benet@blockforms.co, and it's 1N1T. And that's the best way to get started with our company.
Well, I can't thank you enough for wanting to come and show everyone what BlockForms is all about. I think it really fills a very, very good, unique niche in what recruiters are going to need throughout their process. So I'm excited to be able to show more people about this app. Anything else that we didn't talk about the specific app that you want to make sure people know about?
I think we've covered quite a bit. We're constantly in, beta with things that we want to improve and work on. One of the things that we're rolling out is an integration with DocuSign. So if you already have licenses with that organization, we'll be able to use their DocuSign signature on the envelope. So good things and partnerships that we're working through just to try and make this a better and work smarter, not harder environment, right?
Well, Benet, really appreciate you taking time out. Thank you so much for wanting to share it with our audience. I'll make sure that the links to all of this content and all of the ways to get in touch with Benet are below in the description of this video. And yeah, Benet, really appreciate you taking time out.
Thank you very much, Brad.